Powered by Righteous Media.
Welcome to Independent Americans. And welcome to New York City in the middle of a heat wave, which is fitting because the temperature kept getting hotter and hotter in America. And just when you thought it couldn't get hotter, Trump did a bomb strike on Iran. The summer is here and it is about to get even hotter. And now is most definitely a time to stay vigilant. As the news, politics, and spin continue to unfold after Trump's unprecedented strike in Iran, I'm coming to you from downtown New York, where we just had a blockbuster Democratic primary, and the World Trade Center tower, the Freedom Tower, is just over my shoulder. And coming up, I've got a conversation with maybe the most powerful independent leader in America. The independent United States Senator from the state of Maine, Angus King, is finally on Independent Americans. We're going to talk about Iran. We're going to talk about the War Powers Act. We're going to talk about what it's like to be a true independent in the Senate and much more. So stick around for that. But before we get to my conversation with Senator King, and as the temperature here in New York breaks 100 and continues to rise around the country and around the globe, it is time to dig into my top topics. The number one topic, most definitely, President Trump's unprecedented strike on Iran. We thought this might be coming. The storm clouds were looming. And on Saturday night, B-2 bombers left from Missouri and struck Iran. I found out the news, ironically, when I was at a friend's daughter's bat mitzvah here in New York City. The whole world watched as Trump did what many presidents had considered, but never went ahead and did. He did it. He dropped bombs on the nuke development sites inside Iran. This followed weeks of Israeli attacks on Iran and months, actually years, of Iranian proxies hitting American forces throughout the Middle East. As a reminder, we've got 40,000 troops in the region who are in harm's way. Only history will tell us if what Trump did turned out to be the right thing. But one thing is for sure, he did it the wrong way. Coming off the heels of blowing through the guardrails protecting our military and democracy around the deployment of National Guard troops to Los Angeles, after blowing through the guardrails by deploying federal troops in Los Angeles and to 3 other states, he pushed the limit in a way no other president has, and he struck inside Iran without consulting Congress, without consulting with the Gang of Eight, and without consulting with the American people. There's an old adage that I've said for years. First, commit the country, then commit the troops. Every time a president of the United States has inverted those two, it's led to disaster. And let's hope it doesn't happen right now. But in the meantime, America is again caught in between a political maelstrom with our troops and our military in the middle of it. This is accelerating to a new place, to a most dangerous course of action, and a place our politics and our country and our military have never been before. One important thing to remember, no matter which direction this goes, the truth is always the first casualty of war. Always. And especially with these guys in charge. They haven't been honest and transparent about a lot of issues. They've exaggerated and lied in the past about everything from whether or not Trump won the election, to whether or not January 6th actually happened, to their crowd size, to Trump's weight and golf score. Combat reveals the true character of leaders. And right now, it is revealing the faulty, dysfunctional, broken true character of President Trump, Secretary Hegseth, and the entire crew. So stay vigilant, people, because Congress is not doing their job. Congress is supposed to demand that the president ask for war. Congress is supposed to slow him down. Congress is supposed to ask the tough questions, and they are failing Our president is failing, and we, the American people, the independent Americans especially, are the last line of defense for our military, for our national security, and for our democracy. So no matter what direction this goes, in between the time I finish recording this and it posts, stay vigilant. Also this week here in New York, the biggest primary in America happened. The Democratic primary that would determine who the Democrats would nominate to be the most influential mayor in America. And by now you know that Socialist Zohran Mamdani shocked the political world, beat Andrew Cuomo and a field of other dysfunctional Democrats, and will now likely be the nominee for the Democrats for mayor of New York City. Now there's a lot to unpack, but here's what I think you need to know. Only roughly 1/3 of Democrats voted in this primary. That means about 1 million out of 3 million Democrats. And the ones who did were obviously motivated by Mamdani's message of energy, positivity, but also unfundable free stuff like free public transportation and free grocery stores. He's also said he wants to defund the police, and he's extremely anti-Israel. Most notably, he is undoubtedly very far to the left. This sets up what might be a 5-way matchup between 4 of the most unpopular figures here in New York City. Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic Socialist, Andrew Cuomo, the disgraced former governor, Eric Adams, the disgraced, corrupt current mayor of New York City. By the way, Cuomo and Adams may both run as independents. They're not independents, obviously, but they like what we're cooking. Republican radical and crazy person Curtis Sliwa, founder of the Guardian Angels. And finally, recent guest on this show and the only true independent, prosecutor Jim Walden. This was a great night for Mamdani, a great night for the left. I think a bad night for the Democrats if they ever want to win general elections and in places around the country. It was a very good night for Donald Trump, who was licking his chops about the prospect of a self-proclaimed socialist who's 35 years old and also happens to be Muslim. And a great night for Jim Walden, who now has an opportunity to do what Mamdani did in the primary. He can shock the world and show that not only is a Democratic Socialist viable in the Democratic Party, but an independent is viable for mayor of New York City. Here's what you need to know. In New York City, the Democratic primary usually determines who the mayor is. It's usually a lock at this point, but not this year. This is wide open, and the general election is on, and the general election matters. And independents are going to be in the driver's seat, because not only do we have a candidate, we will also be able to vote. Because also this week, and worthy of inclusion in my top topics, in the midst of all of this national and international news coverage around the Democratic primary, it's important to note, I could not vote. And 1 million other independent New Yorkers could not vote because New York City, unlike 85% of other cities in America, still has closed primaries, meaning 1 million independents like me could not vote in our publicly funded primary. Remember, they use public funds. They use public schools to fund private primaries that I and millions like me can't participate in. It's not just broken, it's rigged, it's un-American, and it's unacceptable. But the good news is, people are starting to understand it. And not only will we have an independent candidate on the ballot here in New York City this fall, in the biggest election in America, we will also likely have a ballot initiative on open primaries. Every single New Yorker will have an opportunity to decide if they stand with all New Yorkers or against us. Do they believe that every New Yorker and every American should have an equal vote? Or do they think our public funds and tax dollars should only go to fund closed primaries that end up nominating extremely radical leaders from both parties? Open primaries are overwhelmingly popular and overwhelmingly fair and continue to gain momentum after recently passing in New Mexico and other states. So this fall, the battleground for our movement will be here in New York City, where we will determine in America's #1 media market and arguably the most influential city in America, whether or not independents get an equal vote. They say if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Well, that is definitely true now for independents. And this fall, we're going to make it happen. Stay vigilant. Like me on those stairs that were behind me in the earlier segment, our movement continues to go upward. We continue to rise. to go above the noise, above the chaos, and represent a moderate, centrist, independent alternative to the broken duopoly and the status quo that continues to produce extremists from both parties. Americans want change. They don't want radical change, but they do want overdue, practical, pragmatic change. And that's what independents are providing. We've been talking about it on this show for years. But there's a man in the United States Senate that's been living it. There is one man that comes from a state known for its independence. There is one man that is a true independent American in the United States Senate. That man is Senator Angus King. And that man is our guest in this episode. Maine is a place of beautiful mountains and beautiful rocky beaches, of blueberries and lobster. It's also a place of freedom, adventure, and independence. It's the home of Civil War General Chamberlain, the legendary leader of the 20th Maine, who led the charge at Gettysburg that saved America and saved our freedom, saved our independence from tyranny, from division, and from destruction. Maine has always held the line for its people and for this country. The great line from Chamberlain is one you'll hear in my interview. Stand firm, ye boys from Maine. That call to arms, to fix bayonets and defend everything, is what we as independent Americans and all Americans must do now in this moment of truth for America. The people of Maine have risen to the challenge for generations. General Chamberlain rose to the challenge at Gettysburg, and generations of Mainers have risen to the challenge for America. And the same is true now of their brave, courageous, and independent United States Senator. Welcome to a summer of heat. Welcome to a summer of independence. Welcome to independent Americans. Ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country, around the world, and especially in Maine, my second favorite state in America. These times are fraught with controversy and division and partisanship. And we talk a lot about the need to bring independent voices to the forefront, to put country over party. And I'm very happy to be bringing into this conversation and onto our show finally, in my view, the really only true independent in the United States Senate, the great and powerful senator from the great state of Maine, Senator Angus King, joins us on Independent Americans. Welcome, Senator.
Paul, it's great to be with you. I like that great and powerful stuff. Can you tell that to my staff? Maybe I can get them to treat me with more respect around here.
You got it. I'm on my way. If it gives me a chance to come to Maine more often, I would be down for that in a second.
Okay.
It's great to have you here. There's so much I want to talk about. I want to talk about what it's like to be an independent. Obviously, want to talk about Iran, Ukraine, what's happening in Maine. But I'm not kidding when I tell you Maine is my second favorite state, only second to New York. I'm wearing a shirt that I bought in Portland many years ago from Loyal Citizen. And
stand firm, ye boys from Maine. Joshua Chamberlain. In fact, let me show you right in my office. There he is right there.
I knew you would appreciate it. I knew you would appreciate it because we need some Chamberlain-like leadership now more than ever, I think. And I wanted to ask you, I saw you in a photo with President Zelensky. Was Chamberlain on your shirt? Is that who was on your shirt?
Yes, he was. And I knew I was going to meet President Zelensky in Kyiv. And I wanted to sort of meet one hero and share my hero. So I found a sweatshirt online that had Joshua Chamberlain on it. And believe it or not, that sweatshirt is now in the Joshua Chamberlain Museum in Brunswick, Maine. I didn't know I was creating a historical artifact. But
incredible.
Yes, that's Chamberlain, the guy who saved the country on July 2nd, 1863, at Little Round Top at Gettysburg.
I've been to his grave. I've been to the museum. I know the story. I think it's one that's important for all times, but especially now. But as we get into all of this, Senator, let me start with a question I ask everybody. These are trying times. Everybody's facing it in their own way, but can you start by telling us where are you and how are you?
Well, I'm in my office in Washington. As you saw, I have Chamberlain on one wall and Abraham Lincoln behind me. Those are the kinds of those are my guides and my mentors. So I'm in Washington. I'm fine, Paul. It's a very tough time. I'm a congenital optimist. This is a great country with great people, and I believe we're going to get through this tough time. But it ain't going to be easy, and it's going to take a lot of people pulling together. And I've got my Constitution tie on, and at the bottom it says "We the People," and that's who it's going to take to get us through this.
I really, really appreciate you saying this because I think most folks feel like the Republicans are driving us off a ledge and the Democrats can't stop them. And I want to get into all of it, but this is Independent Americans. We explore a lot what it means to be independent. This growing majority now in America that is rejecting both parties. We see it as a movement. And I ask all of the folks who've joined me for our Meet the Independent series, and I really want to ask you more than almost anyone, why are you an independent, Senator, and how do you define independent right now?
Well, I'll define it pretty easily. I could put it on a bumper sticker. I call them as I see them. Nobody tells me how to vote or what to vote on, and it's been that way since I was governor of Maine as an independent 35 years ago. And basically, what I saw at the time, I just thought that the partisanship itself was part of the problem. People not talking to each other and taking positions based upon party or the groups in charge of one or the other of the parties. And I thought, hey, I can take a path down the middle and try to bring people together and solve problems. And that's what I did as governor of Maine. That's what I'm trying to do here. But I got to tell you, it's getting harder and harder, Paul, because the people in the middle who were into solving problems are getting fewer and fewer every election cycle. And we've gotten to the point now where you can lose your primary, not because of your position on immigration or Iran or something else. You can lose it because you're not sufficiently hostile to the other side. You're not sufficiently actively partisan. So we get people coming here who don't want to talk to each other. And that makes it almost impossible to solve problems. So I'll tell you, it's a luxury to be an independent. One is you don't have to run in a primary, man. You get your signatures and you're on the ballot. Now, the hard part is convincing the public that you're not a weirdo, or they don't know who you are, and you've got to get through that. And I won my first election in Maine by 1 percentage point. Did pretty well the second time, and my 3 runs for the Senate have done okay because people have gotten to know me.
Sir, you're unpacking a lot. I think the most critical issues that we've talked about on the show that our country is facing, especially with regard to how our democracy does or doesn't work. As I talk to you today, I'm in New York City, where we have a closed primary that uses public resources to run a private primary where independents like me, millions of us, half of the veterans in this city, can't vote, can't participate in a primary. And we've been pushing hard for open primaries here.
And that's one of the real problems, Paul. That's one of the real problems. As I say, the primaries are producing candidates from either edge. Here's the average. You'll like this. The average turnout in a primary across the country is 21% of the voters in that party. That's 1 out of 5, and that's who's choosing our candidates. And 9 times out of 10, the candidates that are chosen appeal to that base. Who is that 21%? It's the most progressive or the most MAGA these days. And again, it's producing people who are literally afraid to be seen talking to each other and trying to solve problems.
And Senator, we've tried to elevate some of the voices that have been successful. Most recently I had Mayor Tim Kelly, the independent mayor of Chattanooga. We had Mayor Yemi Mobilati, the independent mayor of Colorado Springs. We've talked to folks in Nebraska, which in many ways has been kind of an example of how the playing field can be more level. Can you talk about Maine specifically as a laboratory for producing an independent governor and senator? What does Maine get right that can be replicated throughout the country to help create a more balanced, level playing field?
Well, part of it, I think, is in Maine's heritage. And by the way, there was an independent governor 20 years before me in the 70s. That helped me to be credible when I was running in the 90s. But part of it is Maine's history and heritage of fishing, farming, and forestry. What do those have in common? They're all independent pursuits. They're not big corporate enterprises. They're independent pursuits. So in the state of Maine, we know one another. We still have a community, and who you are and your character is much more important than your party. And I'm pretty sure that still the majority of the voters in Maine are unenrolled in either party, and they swing back and forth. We have an independent senator, 2 Democrats in the House, a Republican senator. We've had Republican governors, Democratic. So people go for the person, not the party. And I think that's it's just part of the history of our state.
Sir, as we look at the larger political landscape where the Democratic brand is become toxic, the Republican Party is driving people away, there are now members of the Senate, Kyrsten Sinema, Manchin, others who call themselves independent. We're seeing more and more folks potentially leave the Democratic and Republican Party. I told Jared Golden publicly, I think he would probably benefit from leaving the party and breaking that seal. Do you think that folks are going to cross that line? Do you see any momentum around people leaving the parties because they've gotten to a breaking point, and also, candidly, because there's some political opportunism there where they recognize that either the Republican or Democratic brand is dragging them down in a place where they're more likely to win if they don't have that label?
Well, I'll tell you, here's a problem, Paul, and it's a very practical one. There are 2 practical problems. One is it's difficult, particularly in a state that has no history of electing an independent, to cross the sort of credibility line where people don't think it's a wasted vote. And if there's no history, that's hard. The second thing, I learned this firsthand. You start out without any ready-made infrastructure. There are no town committees. There's no state committee. There's no automatic fundraising base. So it's a hard road, and I think it's possible. And I think you're right. I think it's going to become more and more possible as time goes on, because people are looking for a nonpartisan resolution of a lot of these issues. And the comment I get most frequently in Maine is, believe it or not, thank you for being reasonable. Yeah. And that's a low bar. I mean, that ought to be the standard, not something people comment on. But we've somehow, and I think we will see more independent candidates because, as you say, independent voters are growing as an electoral bloc.
I've been going to Maine since I was a baby. I went to school there for a year in Pittsfield. I feel like I have a feel for Maine, and I feel like Maine doesn't get nationally understood for its unique patriotic brand of independence. People think about Texas, they think about other places, but Maine, I think, is more humble, more consistent, more pure almost in their independence. But it does feel like an outlier in this environment. I want to zoom back because we often talk about the power of veterans and how many veterans are running as independents. We've created Independent Veterans of America because we think America is starving for independent leadership, and especially independent veteran leaders. And that's compounded by the reality of what we are seeing in this national security environment. You sit on the Armed Services Committee, you sit on the Intelligence Committee. I want to ask you a question that I've really asked a lot of elected leaders, and I haven't gotten a real strong answer. Trump, in my view, has blown through many of the guardrails that protect our military and our democracy. He's deployed the National Guard in California. He's now deployed federal troops. He's now bombing Iran without even consulting with Congress or the Gang of Eight. It feels like no one can stop him. The Democrats just don't even look like a speed bump. What is your strategy? You've been outspoken. You've been critical from an independent standpoint. What's your strategy to actually slow him down or stop him from doing things that are not right and potentially even illegal?
Well, you covered a lot of territory, and I hope we get to talk about what they're doing to veterans, because that's one of the worst things. You mentioned my committees. The other committee I'm on is Veterans Affairs, and what this administration is doing there is a scandal in my view. But let me go back to your question. There are really 3 sort of roadblocks or guardrails in this situation. One is the courts, And the courts are holding up their end pretty well. Of course, we don't really know whether this administration will obey a court order. And that is itself a separate problem. The second guardrail is the Congress, and the Congress just ain't doing diddly. The response has been pitiful. Now, I'll defend my Democratic colleagues to some extent, and this sounds like a cop-out, but this place does run on who has the most votes. And it's very hard. Somebody said to me, why don't you throw sand in the gears? One of the problem is the gears aren't turning. This administration is doing practically everything unilaterally by executive order. There have only been 4 or 5 bills passed in the whole Congress in the last 6 months. Everything else is unilateral one-man rule. So the role of Congress is limited. Now, having said that, the Republicans could put a stop to it. And I keep pushing them and asking them, what's it going to take? What's the red line? He runs roughshod over the appropriations process. He closes agencies that were created by Congress. He ignores Congress in terms of making the very important decision about entering a possible war, a major war. What's it going to take? And so far, party loyalty has trumped, if you'll excuse the term, the loyalty to the Constitution. The framers thought that the separation of power, that was the big deal for them, to not put all the power in one set of hands, and they assumed that the Congress would fight for its power. What they didn't reckon on was parties. Madison and Washington railed about don't have parties. They call them factions. Yep. But we got them, and now the party loyalty is overriding loyalty to the terms of the Constitution. Now, remember I said there were 3, the courts, the Congress. The third is the people. Yeah. And ultimately, the people are going to decide. Now, my concern is the people don't get to weigh in officially for 18 months in the elections of 2026. And, who knows what can happen in that period of time, given what's happened in the past 6 months. But the people have to speak up. And believe it or not, members of Congress do listen to their constituents. And to the extent that they believe that the activities of this administration are unpopular and are hurting their own constituents, that's when you're going to see some change around here.
Sir, do you think the Senate will be able to move him to respect them, to have the conversations? Now it's been a couple days since the strikes in Iran. The ceasefire seems to be unraveling. Trump continues, while that's going on, he continues to leave troops in Los Angeles, and I think abuse his power, especially around the military, where their stakes have never been higher. Right now, we're talking about nukes. It just keeps going up a level. But do you have any hope or any momentum around the idea that now you will be able to get Trump back there to counsel with you, to speak with you?
Well,
he kind of did it backward, right? I think Ross Perot greatly said once, you send the country to war, then you send the troops. And when you send the troops before you send the country, we get into a bad situation. That's where we are right now. So what do you do now that this round is out of the chamber?
Well, I think I do see some little green shoots of resistance among my Republican colleagues. For example, there's a bipartisan bill to retrieve the tariff power, which is expressly a power of Congress in the Constitution. I think it's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 12, something like that. And there, as I say, there's a bipartisan bill to pull that back from the president. That's the first little opening that I've seen. The question of the war power, though, is very important. The Constitutional Convention, August of 1787, they had a real debate about the war power. And there were some people that said it's got to be the president because you can't run a war with a committee. And other people said, yeah, but we don't want the president unilaterally taking us into war. So they compromised. They put the declaration of war into Congress and the commander-in-chief with the president. Now, Paul, you're not going to like this. Congress hasn't declared a war since 1942. So we talk about the president usurping power, but quite often it's Congress abdicating. And, we don't want to make this hard decision with, that might result. But this is a classic example of what happened. I don't. One of the unanswered questions is, how imminent was the threat? How was it? Did this decision have to be made in a matter of days, or could it have waited a couple of more days so that there was some consultation and input from members of Congress? The one thing the framers were intent on, and they were right, was that they didn't want this decision to be in the hands of one person, just as they didn't want making laws in the hands of one person. Madison said, if you have the legislative, executive, and judicial power in one set of hands, it's a perfect definition of tyranny. He used that word, tyranny. He wasn't messing around. And that's my concern about where we are right now. And deploying troops is just another step with an emergency that didn't exist. That's that. And I don't know about you, but I never remember Marines being deployed inside the U.S. National Guard in some occasions, almost always with the request of the governor. In this case, it was, again, unilateral, and I think very dangerous. It's not. We don't want our military to get involved in American politics.
No, you are. I think you're right about all that. I don't like it that we haven't had a declaration of war since World War II, to include the war they sent me into in Iraq. And I was deployed in the National Guard stateside, but that was after 9/11, and this is not 9/11. So I think you're hitting on all the important points, and I also think you're cutting into what is missing in this country, which is an understanding that the challenges to Trump will most effectively come not from the left or from the Democrats, but from the middle. And I think we had Representative Bacon on recently, who I wouldn't be surprised if he left the Republican Party soon. We've had other independent voices. I think yours is critical on all these issues of national security, but also foreign affairs and Ukraine. You've been very effective on Ukraine. You've been very outspoken. I think you've been patriotic and smart in invoking Chamberlain, right, to help people understand that this is about freedom and about our values and what we hold dear, not just what's happening in Ukraine.
I want to make clear, it's Joshua Chamberlain, not Neville Chamberlain.
Right, correct.
And in fact, there's a lesson from Neville Chamberlain, which is appeasing dictators is a path to war.
Yeah.
And Ukraine, to me, we should be supporting these people who are fighting for their freedom, no doubt. But this is in our national interest. Because if Putin is successful in essentially wiping Ukraine off the map, he doesn't like it that the Baltics are free and independent countries. Yep. He doesn't like it that Poland, he wants to recreate the Soviet Empire or the Russian Empire. And I got into an argument with a guy on the street in Bath, Maine recently about this, and he said, well, Putin only wants to do Ukraine. I said, okay, ask the Finns. Why did the Finns suddenly want to join NATO after 75 years? Because they know Putin and they know what's coming. And that's why our investment and support, which, by the way, doesn't involve boots on the ground, doesn't involve people. Right. We're just supplying them the means to defend themselves. And, they're degrading the Russian army without us having to send a single soldier in.
Let me ask you this specifically, sir, because they're going to have to make a lot more Navy ships in Bath if Putin continues what he's doing. But specifically, there is now a bipartisan bill with Senator Graham and Senator Blumenthal to finally put overdue, stronger sanctions on Ukraine. I assume you're going to support that if you don't already. What's the status here? What's a realistic timeline? And is this something that we can actually get done this year?
It has 81 co-sponsors, Paul. I'm one of them.
Yep. And
it's about as strong a bipartisan. You can't get 80 people around here to agree on what time it is, let alone something like this. So that's a big deal. Now, the question is, and it's really funny you should raise this because I was talking to a constituent just an hour ago about this very question. I don't know. Lindsey Graham is leading it, and Lindsey's been very strong on this. And so far, he's tried to use it as sort of backdoor pressure on the president to step up his support for Ukraine. But I think it's time to pull the trigger. I think it's time to pass this bill, and it would be secondary sanctions. It would really bite the Russians for this outrageous, unprovoked, illegal attack on a sovereign country. And I think it would force the president's hand. So I can't give you a timeline. but it's high on my agenda, and I think a lot of people are ready to move it. I talked to Lindsey 10 days ago, and he said we're getting close. So I think we'll see it come to the floor in the next, I'd say, a month.
That's encouraging, because part of what I also do is work with American Veterans for Ukraine. There's overwhelming support among American veterans for Ukraine. I think these sanctions are overdue. And this is one of those challenges for the Senate to see if they can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time and get this done before they go on summer break. So you've got our support. And I am going to continue to track it and elevate it in any way that I can. I know I've got to let you go in a couple of minutes here. Let me ask you another thing. Your son is running for governor. He's running.
Yes.
He's running as a Democrat.
Yep.
Do you think he'd be better off if he was running as an independent?
Well, somebody asked him that question, and they said, "Why are you running as a Democrat?" He said, "Because I'm a Democrat." And the other question I got from a reporter last week was, "Are you giving him any advice?" And I said, "I've been giving him advice since he was 2 years old." He's a very good guy. That's the decision he's made. And it's a multi-person primary. He's not a politician. He's never run for public office, but he's built things. He's an entrepreneur, and he's done a lot of stuff in renewable energy and housing. Some of the things that are really issues in Maine. So I think he's got a good shot. But I'm not neutral in this matter.
But I just want to thank you for your leadership, for your independence. I think that more folks in this country need to understand your story, your values, and your leadership, which is meeting the moment right now, but also I think showing independents that they can win, which is really important here. Too often they've been dismissed as radical or crazy or not serious. You know, we put up a slate of candidates last year with Independent Veterans of America, 11, that I think were the most serious slate of independent candidates this country has seen. But they're drafting off your lead. And I want you to know that you've got the support of independents all around this country, especially independent veterans. And I hope you'll come back and have this conversation again. In the meantime, keep fighting forward in the spirit of the 20th Maine, as you do every day.
Stand firm, ye boys from Maine. That's what Chamberlain said. And when he said bayonets, they knew what he meant.
That's right, sir. That's right, sir. Well, thank you again for joining us. I hope you'll come back again and stay vigilant, sir.
I'm going to stay with it, man. I really appreciate what you're doing, because again, if we're going to confront this moment, it's got to be the people that do so. And I'm going to do my best to make sure that happens.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. All right, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Senator Angus King. If you did, please share it far and wide. And if you're not watching us on YouTube, please sure to go there now and check us out and subscribe, where you can see me walking in some pretty cool places downtown at night right now in New York City. Like far too few leaders in America right now, Senator Angus King is rising to the moment. He is running in when others are running out. That's why, just like Mr. Rogers told us, we should be looking for the helpers. And Senator Angus King is one of them. But he's not the only one out there. If you see a helper, especially in your community, running in when others are running out, stepping up when others step back, I want to hear about it. Send me a note on social media, hit us at independentamericans.us, or use the hashtag #LookForTheHelpers and let me know. They're out there. I know they're out there. I know you see them. I know you are them, and I want to know about it. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, we've got more great guests, more inspiration, more light to contrast the heat. And in every episode, just like this one, I'm, of course, going to give you a tidbit or two that I hope will brighten your life, add some light to contrast the heat, and give you a dose of inspiration. So here they are for this episode, my Reichoff's recommendations. All right, I got two in this episode. Number one, be like the Oklahoma City Thunder. If you haven't heard, the Oklahoma City Thunder did it. They went to Game 7 with the Indiana Pacers, and they won the NBA Finals, led by their inspiring leader and MVP of the league, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The reason you should be like OKC, we should all be like OKC, is because they were focused, they were united, they were selfless, and they were a true team. From a small market and the youngest team in the NBA, They came together to put together the best record all season long. And they went through the playoffs, were pushed to Game 7, and they did it, bringing the first ever championship to Oklahoma City. It's the kind of unity and teamwork that we need much more of in America. So whether you're a basketball fan or not, check out the Oklahoma City Thunder, because they can all teach us a thing or two. And their entire season has been a slam dunk, not just for basketball, but for all Americans. All right, my final Rykoff's recommendation for this episode. Watch C-SPAN. C-SPAN, the great C-SPAN, which the U.S. Senate has been taking up in legislation this year to support and protect, is more vital than ever. Avoid the spin. Avoid the cable news nonsense. Avoid even some of the crappy newspapers that are out there and go directly to the source. Watch our elected leaders in action or in inaction, but hear them in their own words. Watch the testimonies, watch the hearing, and watch the clips that C-SPAN posts on all their social media platforms. C-SPAN is a true American treasure, one that is helping us all stay vigilant, and one that we will need this summer more than ever. So, this summer, in addition to your ice cream and basketball and swimming, go get yourself a good heaping dose of C-SPAN. All right, that's it from here in New York City as the heat continues to break 100 degrees. But we're going to try to add some cool to contrast all that fire, because that's what we do here at Independent Americans. If you haven't already, go to independentamericans.us and consider joining our Patreon community. If you like this episode, give just $2 an episode to help us continue to bring independent content to all Americans and to the world. You can also see back episodes and all our archives from great independent Americans, ranging from Sarah Jessica Parker to Ken Burns to WWE superstar Mick Foley. Do you know that Mike Shinoda from Lincoln Park was once on Independent Americans? Go back and check it out. We've had some amazing people on this show to help you through your summer. You can also get some great Independent Americans gear just in time for our holiday. Because guess what's coming up, people? Our day. Independence Day. Or Independence Day, yes. But Independence Day is coming. It is a time to celebrate this show, celebrate our community, celebrate our movement, and celebrate our nation. So go to independentamericans.us and find out more. And invite others to declare their independence. Because we are continuing to put country over party, people over politics, busting up the status quo, and moving forward the new movement that is bringing people together in these trying times. Adding light to contrast the heat. And stay vigilant out there, America, especially this summer. And know you're not alone in your vigilance. We're all vigilant, and we're all in this together, especially as the heat continues to rise. Thanks for listening, and thank you especially if you're watching on YouTube. I'm your host, Paul Rykoff. Until next time, down with Hamas, down with Putin, Slava Ukraine, and stay vigilant, America. Stay vigilant and stay cool.
Powered by Righteous Media.